Welcome to today's episode of Table Talk with
the Mercer County ESC.
All right, welcome to today's episode. This is episode 8, and today we have a guest in the house.
We do. She's pretty cool.
She sure is.
We don't allow guests in our podcast room, so this is pretty
not
serious.
Very often. We actually have a calendar now that people have to block off time for the podcast room, and I think we're the
only ones who use it.
Blocked it off so far. Okay, let us introduce you to Ashley Place. Ashley, you want to kind of tell them about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Ashley Place, and I am a success skills coach here at the ESC, but I'm also a school social worker that is working with some of our districts and also out of Fort Recovery this year. So I'm just going to jump in.
Do it, girl.
With you.
Yes.
Okay, so when they asked me to do this, I kept thinking, like, what should I do to make this, segue into some things and some different ideas I had. And I love to model what I used to do in my classroom. So I brought some props today. They had no idea this was happening.
No.
And
in fact, I was wondering what all this was.
Yeah, there's a box of stuff here. So if you're driving, we have like a bunch of animals and random items that I got from my basement. But what I want them to do is pick one that like resonates with you. Or
I was hoping you were going to ask this.
Yeah,
I was hoping you were going to ask this. Okay, you do it first because we're not going to pick the same one.
So we have like elephants and ducks and bears, eagles, cheetahs.
Oh,
that one's cute.
Oh, I don't know. No, I got to go with this.
Eagle?
You are a predator.
Eagle, the bald eagle.
Okay, well, I'm going with the octopus.
Of course you're going to judge me for whatever I pick. It doesn't matter.
I am.
Okay.
She's so mean.
Okay, tell me why you picked these for I.
Well, I picked the bald eagle because that's one of my favorite things to do is look out our back window or sit out there and watch the bald eagles.
That would be cool. Okay, yours surprises me.
I know.
Yeah. I am surprised. Tell me why you
did that. Because you just thought it looked
She
cool?
picked an octopus.
I picked the octopus, and do you know why? For a multitude of reasons. Actually, at least 2.
For you to explain.
Well, first of all, I have a really big head. The octopus has a big head. No, let me tell you something. In 2008, there were 2 extra large band hats in the St. Mary's All Brass Marching Band, and I had one of them. There were 2 of us with extra large heads out of like 220 people. So I have a pretty big, like statistically large head for my brain. And also right now, like to be frank, I know this isn't very successy, but I feel like I'm just at the bottom of the ocean trying to survive.
It's October.
Mine is all about what relaxes me. She feels like she's at the bottom of the ocean.
You know how octopus, they like drag on the bottom of the ocean? Like somebody help. That's how I feel.
I don't know if they drag on, like they do swim up.
But they can also like contort and do some really cool things.
I also have long arms. See, there's 3. I have really long arms.
Okay. Okay. So I was very intentional with this because when I would meet students or when I was in a district and wanted to meet teachers, I had them pick like a land, air, or sea animal because it's kind of like a personality thing. So like you're air, you're up in the air, like you like to be seen and you can.
That's you.
Yeah, you do like
that's
to be
Lindsay.
Land can go either way. Maybe like they like to be heard, but sea they actually like to hide.
That's not wrong though. If you're being frank,
true.
A lot of people who don't know me well may not think that, but if you know me well,
actually, when I sat here and started thinking about this, I'm like, actually, no, that does make sense. Like,
yeah, I do agree. I mean, I don't know that I like to be heard
or seen. Like you can see them,
but I feel. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be thinking about this all day now.
So this is something that you can do with
that's
teachers
probably why
and
we're
kids.
a good team too.
Yeah,
because we are. Like personality wise,
we are very different,
but we also are.
I always say if I met Lindsay in the wild, we wouldn't be friends. And our octopus and
I'm like, that's not true. Like I make friends with everybody.
See,
I like to meet everybody, but she would be scared of me because I would go up to her and be like,
I wouldn't want to talk to her. She would be the person that if we met out in the wild, I would be talking through my teeth about her to my husband. Like, get this lady away from me.
Gosh. What would you say about me?
I can't say that on the podcast.
Okay, so we actually just made sure that all of our sound was working. And
because if you didn't listen to last week, Lindsay forgot to plug the microphones in last week.
Okay.
Nope, don't
We
make an
are
excuse.
a
They're
team, and apparently it is my responsibility to make sure everything works and is plugged in. And
okay, yeah, okay, but time out. If there's a basketball team, it's
Oh,
not
dear,
the
here we
center's
go.
job to dribble the ball up the court. There are specific jobs for specific members of the team because you don't want a center. You
I
don't
didn't
want
play
me in charge
basketball,
of
so we're
things
not going
like
there.
plugging stuff. You don't want me in charge of that kind of stuff. Logistical stuff. You
I like
never
how
want me in charge of that.
literally the last time we recorded for 30 minutes and we got to the last 5, and that's when we both acknowledged that the microphones were not plugged in, and immediately it was my fault.
Your computer. You were sitting on the side. I'm not too proud to
Okay.
point fingers.
All right, as your
All
SEL
right.
coach, let's
Poor-
keep
Okay,
going.
yeah, bring it back.
poor
SEL coach,
Ashley.
help us.
Okay.
Help
All
us.
right, help us out.
We need some mediation
Yes.
here.
So when I came up with the hijacking of their podcast, I was pretty intentional because we just had Thomas Murray come in to the ESC and all of our districts this past Monday, and it was amazing. It was really amazing. But in his book, if you have not read it yet, I highly suggest. But one of the things he says in there is that sometimes you put the lesson plan aside to have those personal, authentic moments. And you really get to know your students, staff, teachers, and even admin. So I took this opportunity to get to know these two and find out something new, which we did. I never knew that you were in band or wore a squid hat.
Yeah, an enormously large head.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can learn something new.
My husband has a tiny head. So we have 2 kids with tiny heads, like so much so that our pediatrician was like, "Should we worry about this?" I'm like, "No, my husband wears a youth hat." But I have one kid, my son, big old head, just like mine.
That's all right. Big brains.
Big brains. That's
Big
right.
brains. Big brains. So now it's your guys' turn to continue with your lesson after we had our.
Oh yes, we had a lesson plan.
little
Look.
Well,
moment.
and so when you were talking about Thomas Murray, so the book that Ashley was referring to is Personal and Authentic, which honestly is one of the best reads that I have ever read. It's a very easy book. I think it's like 7 or 8 chapters, but we've done multiple book studies. And we were just talking, like, we had it open before our October Professional Learning Day. But we really need to open that back up because we've had teachers reaching out like, I'm going to read this book no matter what. Like, I would love to join the book study now. So that is something that we will add to our website and send out within our next Learning Waves to do another round of teachers. Because I think more teachers now find the value in it.
Well, and the great thing is, like, new teacher, veteran teacher,
Mhm.
I wish I would have read it years ago, but it resonates now.
Yeah.
And there was things, back then I was like, oh, I was doing that. That's why that worked. Or, that's why these kids were doing so well in the classroom because I paused. And there were times I just put the lesson plan aside and sat and talked with them.
Right.
So, yeah, great read.
Cool.
Great read.
Okay, so back to the lesson plan. All right, actually, we'll just start with you sharing a little bit about your background, like, because this is how does one land in a position like this?
Yeah, so I was a teacher for 12 years and elementary, loved the classroom, but was starting to see a bigger need for staff, students, and families. I sat in meetings where families needed resources, they needed really a social work, but it wasn't in the area, and it wasn't a thing, 12 years ago. It's something that's really developing now, but we needed resources. And I'm a person that's very driven and decided I'm going to be that resource. So I went back to school, got my master's in school social work. And because some districts have social work and some don't, I ended up having to kind of move around a little bit to get that experience and work through that. And right when I went to do my internship, which is a very large internship, the ESC opened up an SEL coaching position, which is school social work and education combined. It was a beautiful, beautiful internship and scenario. That's how I got here. And so I still have my teaching license, and now I have a school social work degree, and I get to put both together and build some new things.
Cool.
So
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you were talking about like the SEL portion of this. And so do you want to talk a little bit about like how the past 2 years have kind of looked for you and how it's transitioned into what it is now?
And I don't know if we've explicitly said it, but what does SEL stand for?
So SEL is social emotional learning. Our department's called the Success Skills Department because really we're working on those soft skills, those success skills that they're really life skills, but also skills that can break down those barriers so that education and learning can take place in the classroom.
And they transcend content areas, right? Like all
Yes.
of these skills.
Mhm.
Yes. So there's five areas. And if you really think about like just things that kids need in order to be successful, like in a job or later in life, and you look at the standards of those skills, it kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
So
I think we hear that all the time. Like businesses are looking for, or they're looking to hire people that have those soft skills. And I feel like sometimes we have kind of gotten away from that,
mhm.
or implementing it into like our everyday teaching. Like I look at my daughter who is now, texting, and I think of how does she communicate in an email because her texting doesn't have periods, shorthanded, just all those things that go into.
Well, and with the advent of AI, some of
Right.
the conventional stuff we teach in the classroom, and this might not be the best thing to say, isn't necessarily what we need to focus on anymore because a computer can do it. Dr. Daggett last year told us we need to teach students skills that the computer can't do
Right.
because the computer can do so much.
Right.
So I forget what your original question was to her until I interjected with
Oh
SEL.
no, I just asked about like the last 2 years and how it's
Yeah.
transitioned into this year and what this year kind of looks like for you.
Yeah. So the past 2 years, I was out at a local district for recovery, and it was a great experience working with those teachers and those admin. And I really got to coach teachers, look at things in the classroom that were barriers to learning. I had the opportunity to work in groups, the whole district, or even one on one scenarios. And through that, we have transitioned this back to I'm at the ESC and I get to work with all districts now. We're working on professional development. Looking at, I love data. I love working at data. So that those are coming up. Um, and how we can really break down the data to see what skills we need to teach, work with, or we might be lagging or lacking in the classroom. That can really just promote the academic piece along with the social emotional piece. And so I'm like, this is going to build. I mean, it's building weekly. We have different things coming up, and I don't know. 1 year from now, like I like to come back and say, like, here's what's happened. Here's what we've done. So yeah, it's exciting. It's new, but it's exciting.
Yeah, and when I kind of think about like where it's been like the last 2 years and where we are this year, I kind of think of your role like when you're in one district, you had the opportunity to do more like smaller groups, one on one,
Mhm.
where now it's like working with all these districts, it's an opportunity to really focus on all teachers incorporating this into their everyday lessons.
Well, and what trends are we seeing?
Yeah.
I mean, I get to see, I can, like I said, I love data. So what trends are we seeing, not just in one district, but, county-wide, or even, if we're starting with other counties, um, oh yeah, we're seeing this, or what can we do with this, or the collaboration piece, the networking piece is awesome to work with.
All right. So actually you were talking about like the networking and collaborating and how you're working with multiple districts now. So can you just talk a little bit about how you plan to support the teachers and staff in understanding and implementing those success skill practices?
Yeah, so this year we're going to focus a lot with tier one and tier two, which means we're going to focus on district wide, or districts can have, small groups of cohorts that I or we can come in and work with those teachers. One of the things that we have coming up is looking at their state report card with the data from that report card. And one of the things that I was focusing on with that was just looking at engagement of a lesson and how do we keep that brain open, so that the content can come in, and also like it solidifies, like it becomes at that mastery concrete level. And so when we had Thomas Murray come in and we were looking at his presentation, his delivery of his content, and you looked at the room, I mean, everyone was engaged.
Mhm.
Everyone was, I mean, they were actively listening. They were fully present. And so I was fully present, but I'm also looking at how did he get here? And there are some very strategic things that he did to keep that engagement. And some of those break down to movement at very specific times, building relationship, connecting. I mean, we had over 1,000 people in there, and you felt connected to every single person there. How did he do that? But there's some things that, and some materials we have that I want to get out to teachers to say, here's how we really get engagement in our classroom and connection. And we can build upon that in order to get that content in and that learning going.
Mhm.
And that's what, when you look at success skills as a teacher, if there's a student that might be, they're there, but you can tell, hey, something's going on here. It might be as simple as just that one-on-one conversation before you start your lesson with front loading them, like, hey, here's what we're going to do today. Or I know for myself as a teacher, some of my kids, they just needed a checklist, and so there's some skills that we can put in there with executive functioning that can make sure that we really support those kids so that that brain is turned on and that they're feeling connected with the classroom and their peers as well. So there will be professional developments. There will be small groups. I know that we've had some schools reach out just this week to come in and work with some staff in their building. And so again, we're building this. This hasn't really been done countywide yet, and so it's exciting to see where we'll go, what we'll do. And when I'm there, I'm also going to be observing and finding those trends myself
Mhm.
to keep kind of building like where what needs to be seen with our teachers that we can really support going forward.
Well, and I think about the whole relationship piece of it. We had over 900 people in that gym, and from the feedback that we received within our feedback survey was what a great reminder to us that we need to be personable with our students and build those relationships. And sometimes we kind of forget that because we're just teaching those academic side of things. And I think that sometimes when we think about the relationship piece, we think that it has to be this huge extravagant thing when it can just be something so simple, like at the beginning of a lesson.
Mhm. Mhm.
And with that being said, I think a lot of teachers are doing these things already.
They are.
They just don't know why they're working. They don't like back when I was in the classroom, I had a burden box, which is essentially what I wish my teacher knew. And I didn't create that because I wanted to improve my social emotional skills as a teacher.
Mhm.
I created that because I saw a need, right?
Mhm.
So this is almost just giving away because I was struggling as a teacher because the kids were bringing in these heavy things and they would bring them to me. So now I have that times 20 in my backpack of kids that my proverbial backpack. But carrying these with me. So also I think not that it's incredibly important not to forget that this stuff helps the teachers too. Like if we can teach them how to kind of not cope on their own, but to manage some of these things, not only does it alleviate from like a pedagogical standpoint with, not having disruptions, but just from like a personal standpoint, because we're all in education because we want to help people.
Right.
But helping people comes at the cost of sometimes sacrificing your own well-being, especially when it comes to kids.
Yes.
So I think that is something that is incredibly admirable about this whole process is that in a time when it's probably the hardest it's ever been to be a teacher, let's mitigate some of those stressors that we know we're able to mitigate because of some of these things.
Yeah. And so one of my other passions is, really looking at the teacher wellness. I heard you say it a couple of times, and I've been in that boat too. That when you're in the classroom, you have 24, to 30, depending, other human beings, depending on just you. And just for you to be at a regulated state and okay state at all times. But we're human beings too. One of the things I wrote down was one of the phrases I used to say as a teacher was, I don't have time for this, or I have 20 further kids in the classroom. And I underlined the word I because I made it all about me. But I had an excellent boss when I started my career, and she would really press me and say, but why are these behaviors happening? What are you seeing? Like, what have you observed? I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't have time. It was I. So when she pressed me to say, but why? Keep looking. And when I became observant of the kids and I started seeing well, they don't have task initiation. Oh, they just need to walk around their desk a little bit and then the answer pops in their head. I've had some really neat aha moments before I ever knew what I know now. That I'm like, that's why that works. And had my boss never pressed me to say, but why, I would have never found this. But the biggest thing that happened was I took from the I don't have time for this, or I have 20 for their kids to my classroom. I really, that mind shift, I started to enjoy teaching a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Now I became emotionally exhausted because it was we. But this is where and why I have such a passion for working with teachers to say, okay, here's what you can do for
Mhm.
your own wellness. Because when you when your cup's full, you can help others, but you
Mhm.
can't pour from an empty cup, which
Mhm.
is so cliche, but I'm finding it so true.
Well, and it
Yeah.
ties back, I'm going to botch it, but it ties back to Thomas Murray's quote that I think we need to keep central as we progress through all of this. But when we focus more on what we teach
Hmm.
instead of who we teach, that's when the problems start to arise, right? Like I
Hmm.
was an ELA
Mhm.
teacher, but at the end of the day, I had 120 people cycle through my room who are going through some really intense things. And in the vein of being personal and authentic, that's ultimately why I left the classroom, because I couldn't be a good mother and a good wife carrying those burdens. I didn't have a way to manage it. I didn't
Hmm.
know how to, address those issues while also taking care of myself. So I think that in a time when there's teacher shortages and we can't find subs and like the work is so hard,
Hmm.
this is more important than it's ever been before.
Hmm. And sustainable skills. I mean, if we teach our teachers sustainable skills to take care of themselves, they will replicate that to their students. I
And you're
mean,
modeling it, right?
yeah,
Like,
yes.
because I can't imagine also the anxiety that I projected onto my students without even realizing it,
Hmm.
because I'm going 100 miles an hour, and that's the behavior we're modeling to them. That's the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be burnout. You're supposed to be exhausted.
Hmm.
If you're not doing that, you're not working hard enough, and that's
Hmm.
not the way it has to be.
No, no.
So we've kind of already talked about like some professional development, how things are being built this year. So just for some key takeaways for people, what are some practical strategies that teachers can use to integrate success skills into their daily routines or into their curriculum?
My biggest suggestion would be, what are the needs you're seeing in the classroom? What are the behaviors telling you? For my elementary level, I always liked to look at my reading stories. Your characters in your reading stories can model some of those skills, and you can just have conversation. It doesn't have to be, this elaborate lesson, but when you're really having those conversations with your kids, when you really know them, you can talk about these characters through that story. You're also working on comprehension. So, I mean, you're not shying away from the agenda that we got to get all of our academics in, but you can do both. Um, your older grades, I mean, really look at, just ask them. I mean,
Mhm.
just ask them. They will tell you. I mean, I did that last year with some kids, and one of the things I found was one of my students said, "I don't know what study means." And actually, my fifth grader just told me, "I don't know what study means. What is a study skill?" Or working with time management. I mean, I think we expect that they should know something by a certain age, and that's not always the case. So, you know, can you implement like a simple calendar or a checklist for them? Um, Watching the behavior. I mean, just watching the behavior. You can do like during your bell ringers. I mean, you can implement some things right at a bell ringer in those older grade levels. Um, Authentic conversations. I
Mhm.
mean, sometimes they just need talk time. But just when you know your kids, you will know where to implement and where to do certain things. Um, for your older high school, middle school level, our other SEL coach, Abby Auding, has a wonderful frame coach reflect model. To where if you have really difficult skills, you can frame that skill and say, "Hey, we're gonna practice this today in math class. It may be hard, but here's what we're going to do, and here's the skills we already know how to do. We're going to build upon these." And then she tells her teachers, like, you walk around and you're coaching them through the struggle. We have our October newsletter this month is on the learning pit. I mean, the learning pit is something that you can really coach through those challenges and struggles, and then help them on the other side to see that success. But those are some things that you could do to really support at each level.
And I think you just touched on something that may be something that people don't realize is that this SEL, like social emotional or success, it's not just all touchy feely
No,
Right.
emotion. Like it's also
no.
skills that will make them functioning human
Hmm.
beings that will allow them to hold a job, like being on time or monitoring their progress
Mhm.
or task management. So I think that that's something very important, because I was a high school ELA teacher, so it lent. I mean, we did social emotional learning without realizing we
Yeah.
did it, right? By talking in class and things like that. But there are content areas that it feels a little bit harder
Mhm.
to implement this into, some of those more objective content areas. So I think, I think about a math class with a checklist, or
Hmm.
you know what I mean? There are ways. It's not just about kumbaya, let's talk about our
Right.
feelings kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is making them
Well, I was
employable
just
human
thinking,
beings.
like when I taught third grade, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I taught third grade, I just took it for granted. Like I just had assumed that they knew how to take notes and then how to use
Mhm.
those notes to study. And what I started finding was I was looking in their notebooks and I'm like, they're not even copying down half the notes because I think they had never learned how to take notes and then use
Mhm.
those notes to study.
Mhm.
So then I was like, okay, I had to scaffold to that. So I think even just looking at everyday skills that they do in the classroom,
Mhm.
and then how can I scaffold to get them to the point where it's more independent and they know how to do it kind of on their own.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. It is. I mean, I was having a conversation with my sister last night, and she was telling me her third grade son was struggling to bring home his homework every night. And she's like, I don't know why he's doing this. It's 3 days in a row. And I said, hang on, just ask why it's happening. You know, is it the rush of the day? Is it he's forgetting to tear it out? I mean, he's not forgetful, but something's
Mhm.
happening. You know, so why is it happening? Break it down. And I'm going to go back to my old boss. Why?
Mhm.
Why is this happening? You know, were they never taught? I mean, maybe he's never been
Mhm.
taught to tear out the page and put it in the folder.
Because behavior is communication.
All
right?
behavior is
Right.
communication.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're not even taught the skills to say like I mean, this is the part where it might be touchy feely of like I am frustrated.
Mhm.
I am frustrated.
But think about how much awareness it takes to verbalize
Yes.
that. Like as an
Mhm.
adult, I have trouble
Yes.
verbalizing that I'm frustrated. My actions will show it.
Yes.
And
But I have
sometimes I
trouble
don't even know
verbalizing
why
it.
I'm frustrated.
No.
Like it takes me a while to really
Mhm.
dig down. So to have those conversations to help them drill down why it's frustrating or why it's happening, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Because frustration could manifest in multiple ways, right?
Lots of
Anger, crying, like, you know what I mean? I think
Mhm.
about the ways my frustration manifests. And if you didn't take a close look, like if you have 25 kids in the classroom,
Mhm.
frustration can manifest 25 different ways, right?
25 different ways you could have a
Right.
complete shutdown. I mean, and
Mhm.
your kids that shut down and they're really quiet, those are the ones that always made me the most nervous.
Mhm.
Just because the shutdowns happen and they're not going to open up to me, but how do we keep going? And how do I help you? Because you are quiet. And that's okay to be
And they're
quiet.
the ones that'll fly under the
Yeah.
radar.
And they fly under the radar. And as a
Mhm.
teacher, knowing you only have 9 months with them and they're moving on, okay, how do I work with this before they move on? Because I don't want them to fly under the radar. You know, I don't want them to be
Mhm.
set up for failure when they leave me. So what skills can we build upon right now that will keep building as they get older?
That's cool.
Yeah.
This is hard work.
It is hard work, but it's
so important.
So
I know.
important. And when
Uh-huh.
you see the success, it makes the hard worth it.
Yeah.
And sometimes as a teacher, you're setting up the next teacher for success, which is even harder. But when that student comes back to you and says, "Hey, you made a difference."
Well, it's like Thomas Murray
Mhm.
said, you don't know when those moments happen. And that's what stinks as a teacher. I just watched a TikTok yesterday of a woman who is now like a very famous published author. And she called her English teacher back, her high school English teacher back. And she explained to him how a single moment, like literally a single moment, was what encouraged her to start writing. And he wouldn't have known, right?
Mm-mm.
But for, because she was writing under her married name and everything. So he hadn't even realized that it was
It was
her,
her.
right? Now,
so
locally,
cool.
we're so small and rural. I assume it was probably a big urban area.
Right.
Because we would know if someone famous came out of here. Oh, we would know, right? We would know.
Are you going to be our next famous person?
Duh. I'm already famous. There's like 8 people who watch this podcast.
Oh,
That's
you are
right.
famous. Like
That's
when I
right.
say I work at the ESC, they're like, "You work with Lynn or with Emily?"
See, you call me Lindsay. Everyone calls me Lindsay. Copy paste. I know. It's a gift.
It is.
They actually don't pay anybody else any money at the ESC. Their payment is getting to work with me.
It is.
What a gift.
That's right.
It is.
All right, guys. It's the joke of the day.
It's that time.
Word on the street is there are people who don't like my jokes. I have a good one this week. This one is dedicated to Mr. Beckham. If you know, you know. The only one who knows is Ashley because it's Ashley's son. Okay. What do a tick and the Eiffel Tower have in common? This one's pretty easy. Once you know the answer, you're going to be kind of mad. They're both parasites. Parasites.
Beckham's going to love it.
Parasites. Oh, gosh, that's a good one.